Well, another episode of Doom Patrol came along, this one Danny Patrol, and that refers to Danny the Street. Yes, apparently someone, their power has caused them to become an entity that resembles the street of a town. Yes, and it just appears all over the place because Danny can teleport. And what Danny does is reveal people their true selves within themselves. So once again, the episode ends up going back to character study material. Danny himself kind of remains mysterious here. It's just the concept is introduced and utilized not very well. The production was fine. Probably the props were the same town they used in the initial episode that disappeared and all that. But, whatever, that's how you work these things. And all the different ways Danny would communicate to Negative Man and Cyborg, who went to visit this place in search of the chief. And but it's again another filler episode like the last one, except this one just doesn't have anything to save it. The last one had Admiral Whiskers, which saved the episode. This one has a more interesting subplot with Jane and another personality of hers, and that one actually has some funny moments in it, and it's a little bit more interesting, but it doesn't have a lot there to carry the show, and doesn't go very far, and we end up with a bit of a cliffhanger for Jane, and that'll go and be resolved in the next episode, which might, hopefully, will be more than just a filler episode and be more interesting. But I think filler episodes, one too many, can drag a series down, and I think it would be helpful for these shows not to have so many episodes. You might want to rein that in when you can't come up with enough ideas to fill out this many episodes. So the performances are fine and everything else, like I said, is great and all, but it's just covering material they've already covered and pretty much, for lack of a better term, resolved. How many times do we have to hear about Larry Trainor being gay? He's gay. He's more accepting of it now because he pretty much has to, even though, for as far as he's concerned, his life is over after what happened to him, and he's burdened and tortured by his attitudes and his cowardice and not facing up to who he was and all that sort of thing, and ended up hurting everybody rather than protecting anyone other than himself. And he's haunted by all that and tortures himself probably way too much because, good Lord, man, it was a long time ago. And that's another strange thing. I mean, all these people were cooped up in that house when they end up with Niles Calder. And for a very long time, you got Rita and Larry. And then Jane, we don't know how old she is. We've seen instances where she stretches way back as an adult into the 70s and whatnot. So she's really old. And I suppose the youngest member, well, I guess Cyborg, of course, is the youngest member now. But Robot Man appears to be the latest addition when he comes in, what I guess late 80s, early 90s, something like that. I forget. But and then you could, guess that it probably took a while to build the robot body and all that. But geez Louise, they just stay cooped up in that mansion. That alone would drive them insane. But, well, what are you going to do? But here, it's getting to the point where you're exploiting issues and thinking that covers up for the fact that this is kind of just a filler episode with not a whole lot happening. You introduce the character of Danny the Street, which is a really bizarre thing that comes out of the old Doom Patrol Grant Morrison era, and that's all very interesting, and I'm sure to some extent this was inspired by Grant Morrison's fascination with the weird plots of the Silver Age DC comics, most notably The Flash, where he was literally turned into a street corner or something like that, or a block of cement, I think, something like that anyway. And these things had an effect on him, and so the surrealism and whatnot ideas that filtered through Doom Patrol under his watch you see displayed, of course, in this series. It takes most of his influence from that. But here, Danny's just not really utilized all that well. We have this strange, I guess, government agency, the Department of Normalcy, that just hates weird, freakish people. So, of course, they attack Larry Trainor all the way back in his earliest days. It looked more to me like they were testing what kind of powers he had. And possibly a better, more credible story would be that they would exploit it rather than they're just the Klan, you know. I mean, so he's this guy, I forget the name, but he's the leader of this group, and he's aware of Danny the Street, and he's trying to capture him. How the hell he expected to do that, I don't know. But anyway, Danny the Street appears in a certain area, so he sends in one of his agents. And the agent disappears along with the street, and he's like, damn it, we lost it again. By the time Cyborg and Negative Man show up in search of Niles Calder, because they've heard this Danny the Street might lead them to where Niles is. Of course, he doesn't really know. And they tell him that Mr. Nobody has him, and he says, that's too dangerous, I can't do that. You know, and that's how it ends with that. But anyway, when they get there, they immediately go watch a drag queen show. So there you go. And that's about it. They waste a lot of time on music. They get Larry up there to sing and all this stuff, and be accepting. And for a while he has the illusion of his original appearance, so he's feeling great and dancing around and all that. And be yourself, Larry. And yeah, I know. I mean, how many times can you do this story? And so that's what I'm saying, is exploiting that. Well, anyone would have a problem with. They got a problem with gay people and whatnot. No, it's just the same story over and over again. So the moment is, as soon as you see the drag queen, if you didn't catch it, of course, he's the agent that went into the city, and then his true self was awakened, and he becomes his drag queen. He does the show and all that. And then so when the Department of Normalcy shows up, the leader is like shocked to see his agent all in drag, you know, and he says, oh my God, what did this town do to you? And of course he would think that in the way there's this, obviously the story is like, yeah, he helped this agent out to be true to himself about who he really is and all that. But boy, you could really conclude that, how do you know the super powerful entity didn't make you into this person? You know, so, but anyway, yeah, so the bad guy, all of a sudden, all his army just disappears in there, you know, and then Larry Trainor kicks his ass and all this sort of thing. It's like, well, why was Danny the Street afraid of this guy? I mean, he was no match for him. But you know, so that's not important. We were just there to watch a drag show, and love wins and all that kind of stuff. And again, and that's it. So yeah. So, and meanwhile, the Jane story was more interesting and better, and it gave us another facet of another life that Jane lives as this flaky blonde who's obsessed with a man named Doug. No relation to me. It's actually pretty good, but it's too short, and I guess they didn't have enough material, so it had to be kind of the subplot. And that is kind of funny, but it's not as funny and capable of saving the show the way Admiral Whiskers did. So yeah, this is kind of 2.5 stars. This was a pretty low point because it's just repetitive stuff. And if you've watched any of my videos, especially The Walking Dead, you know repetition is the death of shows. Now, this is an early show, and they're just starting out, so it's not as damaging as what happened to Walking Dead. But if you can't fill out the number of episodes, then you need to shrink the number of them and keep your story tight and concise, and don't keep repeating the same story over and over again. I don't want to watch another episode that's the same thing. All of their character studies have been established. We know who these people are. We know what they're suffering from, and it's time for them to do something. And they need to face their fears, challenge them, accept who they are, so that they're a stronger force against Mr. Nobody. And by now, you need to get there. because just telling the same story over again and not really finding that unique or a new way of telling it at all, it's just you just throw in Danny the Street. Isn't that weird? And then that's it. But it doesn't fill out the show. So there you go, Doom Patrol, Danny Patrol. Thank you for watching and listening. Say, why not like and subscribe? And while I've got you here, check out that link description below. Some of those links will take you to my podcast, yeah, but some of them will take you to my mini stores that have plenty of goodies for you.